Since the beginning of Generation 8, Dragapult has been one of the most annoying Pokemon by draft players all around the sphere, whether you're in Showdown, Wi-Fi, etc. So today, I wanted to break down what Dragapult does, what it can do, why I think it should be banned, and why I don't think this is just a problem for either Showdown or just National Dex, but I think it's a problem for both metagames. So if you guys enjoy this content and want to see more, leave a like below and subscribe for more videos just like this. I'm going to try and do a video like this once a week, just discussing a Pokemon and what it does in whatever metagame it is usable in, whether for draft-wise, because at the very least, this is a draft type of video that I don't mind doing, and I still have a little bit of an itch to fill with Draft League content, so this is how I'm going to fill it. With that said, I want to break down first what Dragapult does and why it is so good. So let's start off with Dragapult's typing, stats, and abilities. So Dragapult is a Dragon Ghost typing, which offensively speaking is amazing. Ghost is one of the best offensive typings you can really get, just in general, whatever format you're playing. There's usually some top tier Ghost type that's at least like an A tier, B tier Pokemon. In this case, that happens to be Dragapult. If Dragapult was banned, however, that'd probably be like a Gengar or something, but for now it's Dragapult. With this typing and speed stat of 142, you're able to outpace pretty much everything viable in the metagame. The few exceptions, one, there's obviously options like Mega Arrow if you're playing Nat Dex, and then Zeraora regardless of the dex you're playing. These are two very viable options that would naturally outpace. But otherwise, once you get past those, depending on the league you're playing in, you might see a Deoxys speed. I know it's still kind of making its way through allow lists, depending on the format you're playing. And otherwise, though, you're getting to really unviable Pokemon, or just outright usually banned Pokemon, like Mega Zam is typically an outright ban, or like a Ninjask, which is a typically unviable Pokemon, or a Selgor. A Selgor is probably the last, like, somewhat viable Pokemon you'd really find, and then Regieleki is the only other Pokemon that would even outpace. It's even noteworthy discussion-wise, unless you're playing Ubers. So that's not even enough Pokemon for one person to draft one on each team to outpace Dragapult, even if you're really stretching what classifies as a Pokemon that is worth grabbing that outpaces Pult. So that's like 5 or 6 right there, and one of them is typically not even allowed. So to put into perspective just how hard it is to outpace this Pokemon, typically you'll need a Scarfer, but not just any choice Scarf option. You'll need something that hits, I want to say around base 80 speed for a Scarfer is what you need, because you need to be hitting over Dragapult's speed of 421 to guarantee outpace this Pokemon, even with the choice Scarf. So options like, for example, Tapu Bulu, Dracovish, these are Pokemon that are going to be missing out even with the choice Scarf on outpacing. So that says a lot about Dragapult's speed already, and with the offenses it has, typically, you know, if you see an offensive Pokemon with base 100 and a special stat, or even, like, 120 is pretty good, but seeing a Pokemon with 100, you're not thinking of this Pokemon as a really good offensive menace. But Dragapult makes this work because of its speed, because most games you're not outpacing, or you're not trying to EV Dragapult to outpace that choice Scarf user, or that base 135 Pokemon, like a Mega Lopunny. You're making it outpace Pokemon that are around the 150-120 mark, which is a whole nother ballpark. That's so much easier to do with Dragapult, and it typically will allow you to run Modest or Adamant Nature, or even just a plus speed Nature with a lot of bulk, which gives Dragapult's stat line a lot more fluidity to it as well. With the abilities of Clear Body and Infiltrator, you have a lot going for yourself. With Clear Body, you're avoiding stuff like Sticky Webs, for example, which could end up being pretty useful, as well as potential Intimidators if you're running a Dragonite set. This means that your opponent can't just switch in their Landers, their Incineroar, and try and lower your attack, which does make those sets a lot more terrifying. And with Infiltrator, on the other hand, you're getting past stuff like Screens or Substitutes, which means that they can't try and bring Screens to necessarily beat Dragapult either, which makes this Pokemon that much more terrifying. These abilities on paper, neither one individually are that scary in my opinion. They're both just not bad abilities, but together they make it really hard actually to prepare a really reliable counter defensively speaking with Dragapult, because you're able to get past any sort of actual counterplay to try and nerf the damage you're taking or make it easier to revenge Dragapult. So trying to handle it is a menace. Now let's get into some actual matchups and what sets ended up coming, or what sets I think should come, depending on the sets. I will say, in any case where there was a Dragapult set that I was able to find, I went with the set that was brought, and I'm going to break down why it does good in that matchup. There were a couple, though, that I could not do this for, and I'll get into that as each case comes up. But first up, though, I wanted to show off a matchup that I actually used Dragapult in. This is from my NCP Season 5. I don't know if it was on this channel or the other one, but regardless, I'm going to go over it anyway. This Dragapult set, on paper, shouldn't really do that much. You know, there's a Weavile there that can easily revenge. There's a Porygon too, which is considered one of the best defensive checks. So what set did I run this game for Dragapult to make it do as much work as it did? So this week, I ended up running a no-item Dragapult with Thief, Will-O-Wisp, Hex, and Draco Meteor. With this speed, we should be able to outpace any non-Scarf on this team. With this mark specifically, I believe it was for Weavile, if I remember correctly. If not, then it was for some sort of Scarfer, but I can't really think of what Scarfer it would be. Looking at this does end up creeping Weavile, which is really good because that means that my opponent has to either A, click Ice Shard, which is amazing for us because it forms priority, or B, bring in a Scarfer. I guess there's a C option with Trick Room, but Trick Room wasn't really that good against my team considering I do have a Torkoal that absolutely mauls Leo under Trick Room. So the tandem of Dragapult plus Torkoal really limited the options that Leo could actually reliably bring. So, in my opinion, I felt like in this matchup, Leo was going to be bringing Spadef, Porygon 2, because Specs Dragapult did a lot to Leo's team otherwise. So, with that in mind, I brought Thief with no item. This was to take away the Violate, because that way then 2 Dragos should be able to guarantee pressure Porygon no matter what. So that way then on the next switch into Dragapult, I should be able to just click Draco Meteor, and then Draco Meteor again, and then Porygon 2 should be pretty pressured by that point. And even if, let's say, I got my calc wrong, which to be fair, I might be misremembering a little bit, but even still, I can wear it down sufficiently enough over time, and I have options like Terrakion to pressure it so much easier, or even just stuff like Thundurus T can pressure it a lot easier without having to worry about, let's say, a Violate to try and take this hit on. So Dragapult already was a huge menace this game, and obviously having stuff like Will-O-Wisp for the Weavile and the Melmetal made the matchups against those Pokemon a lot easier, especially Melmetal, which could definitely invest to take hits from stuff like Terrakion or Dragapult, at least on a one-time basis, and revenge them off. So this set was basically my out to mostly Porygon 2 from trying to shut down my entire team. So with that said, let's get into some matchups that are not mine, and let's start off with a matchup from my good pal Matt O'Shea. So Matt O'Shea obviously is a very, very strong draft player in the Wi-Fi scene. At least as far as the scene goes, I would say Matt's a strong player. I think he's at least above average in terms of just the general draft sphere. But at least as far as Wi-Fi, he's one of the better players in my opinion. With this team, Matt drafted a Dragapult Sand team, which I wanted to make sure I showcased at least one, because I do think that X-Control is a phenomenal offensive partner, being an offensive way to revenge off fairy types that might try and kill Dragapult. Stuff like Clefables and Sylveons, which Matt luckily has to fight a Clefable here, so having a Dragapult is amazing for this matchup. With stuff like Regen Core, it's a little bit annoying for Dragapult long term, but in general, Dragapult can definitely still try and be a bit annoying with status this game, and then go for a Hex Wincon, or even just still a Specs set could do a lot of damage as long as Matt picks off the Clefable here. Because at that point, the only other switch in to Dragapult stabs would be Porygon, which Porygon can be muscle passed pretty easily by stuff like Pangoro, or Hydreigon, which is only really reliable for one of the stabs. It's going to still take a ton from Dragon. So what set did Matt end up actually bringing this game? Well, Matt ended up bringing a spell tag set with U-Turn, Hex, Thunder Wave, and Dragon Pulse. And with this set, Matt should be able to Thunder Wave and try and just pull off a lot of shenaniganry against any sort of Scarfers, or maybe like a Rock Plush Terrakion. And Matt does actually mention in his notes on his video, which go watch that if you're interested. I'm going to link the videos for any specific videos that are mentioned here, but I think it's just Matt's if I remember correctly, because I don't think anyone else here uploads. But I'll link Owen's channel because I'm going to cover a set by Owen that has not actually went live yet. So regardless though, with this set, Matt should be able to guarantee take a Life Orb hit from Jolly Terrakion from Stone Edge, which is really useful actually, because that means that even if it's Life Orb Rock Polish, as long as it's not an adamant nature, Matt should actually be able to neuter that thing pretty quickly with this set, as long as he hits his Thunder Wave, of course. With the Hex Dragon Pulse as well, this is pretty good against majority of Shuckle King's team. I believe there's a Shuckle King that Matt fought. And this also gives a way to actually reliably damage Clef, barring a Calm Mindset. Because with Hex Thunder Wave, with the spell tag, you should actually be able to 2-hit KO. I remember this calc actually from when I had to play Clefable with my NCP team. This should be a guaranteed 2-hit KO if I remember correctly. If not, it's a pretty damn close to a KO, which helps a lot because unless a Clef's running a sort of status clearing move such as Aromatherapy or Heal Bell, this Clefable is pretty much neutralized at that point as a Pulse switch in. Because otherwise it could be a soft switch into Specs as long as it gets no Spadef drops. So, with that in mind, this Pulse set actually should be able to do a lot of damage against Shuckle King's team on paper. Now, obviously, Shuckle King is a phenomenal player, so there are still ways that he can maybe try and muscle passes with stuff like Scarf Hydreigon, but again, they risk T-Wave in most cases, and also Spadef Porygon does have a bit of an issue with stuff like, as I said, Pangoro, but also stuff like SD Drill can pressure it at the very least, same as Specs Prim, and if anything, Matt could always just try and overwhelm it. Though, I will say, if you're looking for a really good low-tier counter to Dragapult, Porygon is a great one, though I also think that it's a problem that people consider Porygon as much as they do, specifically for Dragapult. There are so many people I've asked why they draft Porygon. Burigo is a great example of this. I know he drafts it because he started using it for a Dragapult check, and I know a lot of people do that, myself included. So I think it already shows how terrifying this Pokemon is that people draft a soft check in Porygon just to make sure it does not rail them, because you really need that normal type. It's not like a Spectrier where you have really good options like Scarf or Shout Pace and Revenge it off, because at the very least Pult has Thunder Wave to neutralize those, as we see here. So with that in mind, let's get into our next matchup. This is a matchup that does not actually happen, so I built a set my own. Apparently Owen is playing this game tonight, so I'm hoping that I don't give any ideas, but I'm assuming by this point neither player is going to revise their prep, and they might even play before this game goes up. Before this video goes up, I should say. But with this set, Dragapult mauls Matt's team in this game, with the only switch in to Dragapult really being Spinef Togekiss and also Persian alone form. This is one of those games where you could pretty much get by with a choice specs Dragapult, with Shadow Ball, Draco, U-Turn, and Hex. With this set, I decided it would be best to just guarantee creep any sort of alone Persian, and then go a little bit over just in case of Zero Aura creeps. Though I will say, at the very least, I'm sure that Owen probably knows this, but Matt's pretty safe with the speaker typically, so I'm assuming that he's probably just going to creep for alone Persian outright, and then Zero will probably just creep Dragapult outright, because it is a Pokemon you really need to respect like that. So some advantages, of course, that Matt would have against this will be Zero Aura just naturally outpacing. It can go for stuff like Player Off and Knockoff that could end up handling. So a Resist Berry wouldn't necessarily even be the safest way around this. But at the same time, Owen still has Nidoking, which with the Black Sludge Spinef could end up being a reliable switch into that, at least for a few turns. Also stuff like Whimsicott could be a nice soft check at best. And then same for Uxie, again, a soft check at best, to really just give enough switch-ins until Pult is the last mon, until Zero is the last mon left, I should say, or maybe just Togekiss, and then something like a Melmetal, like a Fizzef Melmetal or an AV Melmetal, could end up maybe muscle passing both of those. So in general, I do think that this Pult is really good here. If nothing else, Matt definitely has to pick a sack usually every time it comes in, barring maybe like an AV Persian. I think it's the only thing that, besides Togekiss, could probably take the hit. But typically against most of these Pokemon, this is a matchup that I think really showcases why you need a really Spinef bulky Dark type, if not a really Spinef bulky normal type. Because Togekiss will only do so much, because at the very least, it's still taking a lot of damage from Shadow Ball, which truthfully is the more spammable stab here, considering between that and Hex, either A, Owen could go for T-Spikes and try and status spam the team, with also stuff like Thunder Wave on Uxie to hit the Pokemon like Togekiss and Roserade, though Roserade is a good natural key switching for that. And then the other option that Owen has is to maybe just go for Shadow Ball in game, because Shadow Ball is still a really spammable option here, with Persian only having so much ways to actually get health back. Basically, if Matt's out here, would probably be to go for like a Wish Baton Pass set with Togekiss with Spinef, try and heal out both itself and also Persian consistently, and that's really all that he has for this sort of set. But in general, Dragapult is still a really obnoxious Pokemon here. Let's get into some Showdown sets though, because I've covered a lot of Wi-Fi sets. What makes Dragapult so terrifying in Showdown is partners like, for example, Mega Medicham, which this draft is brought to me by Harris. So shoutouts to HarrisisAwesome, a really solid, of course, player in the Showdown scene. And his team is definitely quite literally the most generic version possible, in my opinion, of a Dragapult team in National Dex. He has stuff like Rotom Wash and Mandibuzz, which are phenomenal pivots, and not only did he get a phenomenal pivot, something I forgot to mention in my team, but one of the best counters consistently for Dragapult would be considered Mandibuzz. If you ask anyone, most people will at least put it in their top 3 as a good check to Dragapult, if not their top 1. But Mandibuzz is a really reliable check, and not only is it a reliable check to Dragapult that Harris just took off the board, but it's also a really good pivot to slow pivot in Dragapult. So Harris is a really good team to slow bring in Dragapult with stuff like Parting Shot Silvally. He has U-Turn on Mandibuzz, Volt Switch on Rotom Wash. And even on the faster end, he has stuff like Mega Medicham that could be Baton Pass, which, to be fair, I don't know why you'd really fast pivot in Pult, but besides the point. And also, to an extent, U-Turn Volcarona, though it's probably not why he drafted it on this team, to be fair. But I pulled up this team. This is actually a playoff match that Harris had. And initially I pulled it up because I didn't think it was a matchup that Harris played at all, but I realized he did play it in playoffs, so I actually stole his playoff set because I think it's actually a really good set. Better than the sets that I was sort of thinking of personally. He brings a Berry set with Willows, U-Turn, Hex, and Trick and Meteor. With this set, the Berry is really useful, obviously, for stuff like Shadow Ball Porygon 2, as well as for Shadow Sneak SD Gallade, which SD Gallade could do a lot of damage to this team. Something like an Axel CC Shadow Sneak variant could definitely put in a lot of work against this draft. Really, at that point, the only switch-in would be probably, like, really just Duosion and Weezing, which Duosion's not a bad switch-in, but you could definitely SD pass it, and also there's still obviously Knockoff as a threat for that, so Duosion's not even really a safe switch-in. And then Weezing would never switch in until it knows that you don't have a Psychic move on Gallade. So Gallade has enough options to where it can at the very least pick to hit a majority of this team, and Shadow Sneak is definitely a scary one. So with this set, obviously with the Berry, just in case a Gallade is set up already, Harris should be able to take a Shadow Sneak from Gallade and then go for a Will-O-Wisp on it and pretty much neutralize it as well as possible. That way then it forces stuff like Heal Bell or Aromatherapy and Clefable again, which speaking of course, we do have the Will-O-Wisp and Hex set again. Now without the spell tag, to be fair, Harris can't guarantee a 2K on this, but it's not as big of a deal because Clefable now has to decide between picking off Dragapult or Mega Medicham. And those 2 in tandem do force a lot of teams to sack Pokemon. I think this is why I think that Dragapult is a bit more terrifying in National decks, actually. Because despite the fact that the board has more Pokemon, and I think a lot of those Pokemon added favor Dragapult so much. Stuff like Mega Medicham, and if you're really lucky, Mega Gallade, make for destructive partners. And even still, you have options like Mega Lop as well for a faster option if you want a faster fighting type Mega. And then you can build speed just down from there. But there are a lot of really good fighting type Megas that pair phenomenally with Dragapult that you're probably going to see through the other matchups. So they really open up each other's teams because regardless, let's say, for example, Dragapult takes out Slowking. Now there's not really a great switch into Mega Medicham, and it goes wild this game. Which is another thing as well. Pult doesn't need to be the carry each game. It doesn't need to be getting 6 kills every game. What Pult does best is the fact that it is such a free enabler to other Pokemon to make them so much more terrifying. Such as the Slowking Mega Medicham example. If you pick off Slowking with Dragapult, or just force it down low enough to where it has to sack to Slowking, you're making sure that Slowking is not around. It's a good Psychic type switch in, and it's a good Fighting type switch in on this team because it resists both, and it can run a Helmet with Regen to try and wear Medicham that way. Or same for Clefable, it literally has to pick and choose if it would rather be a check to Dragapult or a check to Mega Medicham. Now, to be fair, I'm assuming this would probably be choosing Mega Medicham in this case because obviously Harris's opponent does have both a Porygon 2 and a Drapion here. But there are other options the Dragapult could still run, at least to maybe wear these down, or even just use itself by clicking U-turn to bring in Medicham on these Pokemon, and then again, keep forcing sacks. So the two together really do force a lot of pressure for a lot of teams, and I think this is one of those reasons why I think that Dragapult doesn't need to be just the focal point of a team. It could easily just be a support piece, and it's a really good one of that. Just like when teams used to bring Light Clay Screen's Coco back last gen, or just like a Taunt Roost set. It's a very easy support piece for such a top tier Pokemon, when typically people think of using those top tier Pokemon as just really good offensive .jpeg buttons, and it can do that, but it doesn't have to be. So next up though, I want to get into a team that my good pal Veno. Veno is one of the better draft players that I know, I would say. I give him a ton of shit all the time about this, but Veno is a really good draft player. He also is a really good Pult user. Literally, I think when I asked about Pult, one of my friends, Matt, not Matt O'Shea, one of my other friends, Matt, literally first person he suggested was Veno, because he knows that Veno, as well as I do, has used Pult really well in the past. So I wanted to bring up this game, and this is actually one that I'm going to have to show a replay for, because I feel like that this is a bit nuanced of a matchup, but this is one that I think if Veno does a better job of playing it than I could ever explain the matchup for. So getting this set really quickly for the set that Veno ended up bringing, which was Leftovers Hasty Nature with Substitute Dragon Darts, Shadow Ball, and Disable. This set basically is really the only way in hell that Veno could ever be bringing Dragapult, in my opinion, in a game against a Hoopa Unbound and a Chansey, as well as stuff like T-Tar. Like, this matchup in theory should never be winnable for Pult. But I want to just pull up the replay really quickly, just because I feel like that I could never do justice just how good Veno did with making Pult work at all this game. So here we see Veno ends up bringing Weavile, Heliolisk, Dragapult, Buzzwole, Seismitoad, and Moltres. And his opponent ends up bringing Hoopa Unbound, Slowbro, Mega, Corviknight, Chansey, T-Tar, and Among Us. So on paper, this Dragapult should, like, Dragapult as a Pokemon just should never be doing a lot of damage this game. But I want to just really quickly show, I'm going to go through this really fast to be fair, because we've already been going for 18 minutes and I still have 2 more matchups to go over. So I'm going to really quickly go through this. But basically though, I want to just show as we go why Dragapult is such a good Pokemon. So at this point, Veno's basically just trying to play to wear down, and I'll quickly go over this while Veno's actually doing it. But basically the game plan for Veno, as I'm sure should be aware on matchup, with that sort of set, he needs to wear down Pokemon like T-Tar, Chansey, and Hoopa Unbound to where they shouldn't have an opportunity to actually come back from this game. With Veno set with sub disable, he should be able to try and neutralize any sort of coverage that these Pokemon might have to try and break a sub, with Dragon Darts being really spammable considering the only resist in this team actually is Corviknight, and Shadow Ball is just a really good way to actually hit that if necessary. However, more times than not, Veno will probably be relying on options like Heliolisk and Moltres for the Corviknight, which are both really good options, especially Moltres to be completely honest. With Shadow Ball as well, it's really good for the Slowbro because it is a Mega Slowbro. Now, there are definitely ways that Mega Slowbro could cause issues, but ultimately, with Disable and Sub, Veno can at least try and neutralize them as well as possible. So, the best part is as well, with this speed, with this Disable set, you're able to actually, like, pick your turn. You don't have to try and bank on it with, like, maybe a slow Pokemon, such as... I'm trying to think of slow Disable Pokemon, but I can't really do that. But because of the speed, Veno doesn't need to wait for the Slowbro to, like, get a prediction right. Veno could just see it, click an attack, and then try and disable it, or even just do that with recovery and try and stall break it. So he has options to pick with that disable option, and it really makes any sort of slowbro pretty useless against it, which otherwise maybe you can go for enough calm minds and try and beat this set because it just hasn't actually had his death. With disable, it takes that equation out of the picture. So right now we see a lot of back and forth. I'm gonna skip ahead a few turns just to see some more pieces get worn down. But right now, it's really just back and forth. For example, Among Us is now gone. That takes out any sort of regen potential. Takes out potential to spore Dragapult as well, which is great. Or even just foul play. Foul play is another option that Among Us gets that could actually be threatening to pull. So now we're just seeing some more pieces get worn down. We see Corviknight drop to actually Buzzwole, which I'm kind of shocked to drop the Buzzwole, but it's still really good. Because of that, Moltres is no longer needed because Moltres doesn't do anything. So Veno got out of exchange pretty risk-free because now he also picks off Hoopa and Bound, which Hoopa and Bound is one of the better switch-ins to this set. Well, to Pult in general, at least special Pult. So now he can much more easily spam Shadow Ball, though to be fair, it's really more so for the Slowbro than anything, because obviously we still have to worry about stuff like Hoopa and Bound. Well, stuff like T-Tar and Chansey. So it's just one less Pokemon that could switch on Shadow Ball that is out of the picture. With this Helios cut as well, he's trying to Charge Beam up, which is great, because this means that if Slowbro is not going for a Psychic move and is instead going for a Water move, that Veno kind of just walls it, and he's really just trying to set up with Helios at this point. We see this is Rest Talk Dual Dance, so that means the last move is probably Sword Power, which is good information. That means the set really can't ever beat... Actually, it's Flamethrower. We saw Flamethrower. So at this point, the set definitely is just trying to set up as much as possible, because by doing that, eventually it will be set up enough to try and just take on the rest of the team. But we see that instead, Veno's opponent ends up actually switching here to preserve the Slowbro, because it could end up just getting set up enough. We saw that Charge Beam is doing too much damage, so try and get another point. Because the Chansey's in now, this is the perfect target to set up a substitute against. This stops the Thunder Wave from going off, which means that the Hack Shenaniganry is out of the picture for Pult. With just these 3 Pokemon left as well, Dragonite does some good damage, and this should pick off in like 2 more turns. But luckily for Veno's opponent, they ended up actually bringing a Rest T-Tar, which Rest T-Tar is actually a really good check to Dragapult. It gives enough actual recovery, though to be fair, I think I would have probably went for Wish Chansey with Teleport and try and Wish up T-Tar to be more reliable. That way then it doesn't seem to be asleep, but to be fair, Veno's opponent could just as easily bring a Cleric option and get the same effect. So it doesn't really matter. Rest at the very least gives T-Tar a little bit more turns in certain departments, especially if Chansey goes down, it's not as reliant on it. So both work. With this set, we see it as Flamethrower, Rest Talk, and I believe we saw the last move, but we actually haven't. It's Crunch. Crunch's last move. With the set as well, because of the fact that Veno's opponent ended up actually staying Indigo for the Crunch turn here, it's now forced out, and that's in range of Rocks plus Dragon Darts here. So that T-Tar is no longer actually a check. And what Veno could do here, and I believe this is what he actually does, yeah, he doubles into Pult. Because no matter what, if this Chansey doesn't specifically click, T-Wave here, then Veno just wins the game. And we'll actually see that Veno's opponent forfeits here. But because of the fact that Veno's opponent opted for the recovery route, which if they didn't opt for the recovery route, then Veno could truthfully just sack Pult and then go for something like really the other 4 pieces could have definitely done the job here. But specifically because of the fact that Veno's opponent clicked Soft Boiled here, Veno gets a free substitute. We saw that Chansey didn't really seem to be able to hit this. It has Soft Rock, Soft Boiled, Thunder Wave. Its last move is probably Seismic Toss. So this Chansey is kind of hard walled. It's really the best way it could do is click Thunder Wave. T-Tar is in range, and Slowbro is also in range. So Veno's opponent lost this game at this point. So this Pult on paper, just Dragapult in that matchup, that's a Pokemon you would never think of actually bringing. But to this game, it ended up doing a pretty much checkmate position on his opponent, to where even if the game didn't forfeit, I think Dragapult just won the game entirely at this point. So very good job to Veno. I think he played that perfectly, exactly what he needed to do. When I saw this game, I did not think that Pult could have ever done anything close to this much work against this matchup. But shout out to Veno, and congratulations on his Trickhouse title here, of course. So now that we've broken down how terrifying Pult can be, even against some really terrible matchups, what should you be doing if you want to use Dragapult still? It's not available in Standard Draft. So I want to present to you a couple matchups where Dragapult could still even do some work against some of the massive behemoths and Ubers. So luckily I have a couple sets. I'm bringing both Burigo's matchups here because I want to show off a couple sets, one being Physical Pult, which I've not actually shown off in this video yet, but it is still really good, and I feel like this matchup against myself actually that Burigo did recently was a really good example of Physical Pult. So on paper, obviously I have stuff like P2 as we've established as a really good switch-in, as well as Sylveon, which I brought as a switch-in in general. Well, I had it in this draft for stuff like Pult, Veltal, etc., a lot of the special dragons. So Burigo actually takes advantage of this really well and goes for a choice Banded Dragapult with U-Turn, Phantom Force, Steel Wing, and Dragon Darts. With Phantom Force, my only real switch-ins to this are Zoroark, which is pretty worn down very easily, and Porygon 2, which Burigo has stuff like Infernape, Groudon, etc., even Corviknight, they can all at least somewhat, if not reliably pressure, and obviously knock off on a Weavile 2 to get rid of Violet. So he has a lot of options. To be fair, I will say, I don't have the entirely accurate portion of Burigo's draft. I forgot to adjust for free agents, but Staraptor was not here, that's why I didn't mention it. It was a Diancie and a couple other Pokemon changes as well, but the Groudon, Infernape, Corviknight, Weavile were all at the very least here as of the time of this. So at the very least though, we do, actually maybe not Weavile either. I can't remember if Burigo had Weavile as of this point. Let me actually really quickly check that. So the other Pokemon were actually, instead of Xurkitree, Weavile, and Staraptor, Burigo ended up having Thundurus T, Diancie, Rampardos, and Drapion. So Drapion still accomplished the same job as Weavile, basically. It just needed to knock off Porygon 2. Obviously, still Thundurus still had nasty plot sets that could be terrifying as long as it brought Focus Blast. There was Infernape still, which is still a menace. Groudon can SD and pressure Porygon 2 that way. So Burigo still had a lot of options to take care of Porygon 2 to enable the set. And even still, Banded Dragon Darts just does a lot of damage if Burigo clears Sylveon, which is really the only super reliable switch in. Because Empoleon, spoilers, Empoleon did not come to this game. Empoleon would never be coming to a game with Groudon, Infernape, etc. And even still, Burigo has those Pokemon to take care of it. So there are definitely a lot of ways that Burigo was able to open up an endgame with Banded Dragapult to really just maul no matter what set I ended up bringing. This set should perfectly creep my team. With Adamant Max Speed, I believe this is meant to be a creep on, I want to say Spectrier? Pretty sure it's like perfectly creep Spectrier if I remember correctly. Or at least, nope, this set actually is for base 125. Why did Burigo not speed creep with this? I couldn't tell you. But regardless though, this is still really good, obviously. The set still mauls me offensively. And let's get into one more team, which ends up being Burigo's team for his finals game against M-Dragon. Now, this is, again, a matchup that, while it's definitely checks we haven't actually won over, it still has some really reliable checks. For example, Gigalith is actually a pretty good Spadef option for specs, because you still have options like Throat Chop, for example, that can do some good damage to Pull, and also Heavy Slam is pretty not bad. You still have options like Curse, and at the very least, you could maybe Muscle Pass Dragapult that way, you know, damage boost yourself. To be fair, you kind of need to dedicate Gigalith to do it, but it is a soft check at best. It opens up Drill, though, more importantly, which is a really good way to revenge off Pull, if nothing else. And then you still have options like Finny, and also the Gigalith, not the Gigalith, or Shifu. They can be very good ways at handling Pull, with their Shifu having both Scarf and also Sucker Punch options, and Tapu Fini being just a really good switch-in. It's one of the better switch-ins that doesn't have recovery. So with that in mind, what set did Burigo actually bring to this game? So in this game, Dragapult ended up opting for more of a revenge killer with U-Turn, Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, and Fire Blast. With this set, basically, it's just meant to be Scarf to try and pick off stuff that might have a little bit of HP left, or maybe even just open up for opportunities for ones like Weavile and Infernape to really clean, because those Pokemon are both pretty good in this game as well. Basically, with this sort of team, Dragapult wasn't really doing a ton, but at the very least with the Choice Scarf, this should be able to outpace every single Pokemon on this team, including Excadrill in the sand, which is great because it means you get a Fire Blast off for free, which is really useful when trying to open up something like, for example, Infernape in the endgame, because then you don't need to rely on Mach Punch, which Drill could always run a Resist Berry for, or even just keep healthy enough for, because in the end, Mach Punch is not going to do a ton of damage to Excadrill. It'll probably do around like half to 60%. So this way then, Burigo had a way to guarantee outpace and maybe clean off just in case if a little edges need to be quickly trimmed. This also outpaces Pokemon like, for example, Flame Charge Victini, which could have been terrifying, especially seeing that Burigo has Sun for it. So there were definitely a lot of things that this Scarf Pull helped with. And this is another case as well, that Pull doesn't even need to be damage boosting to do a good offensive job. It can easily run Scarf and just clean up teams. Now, to be fair, Burigo didn't really need it this game. He ended up opting for an Infernape endgame, but in this case, it just really needed to pivot, and that's all it needed to do. And again, just getting that other Pokemon in is sometimes all you really need for a really broken Pokemon to succeed. That's why options like, for example, in G-Base Season 2, when Pokemon like Mega Lucario were allowed, they didn't necessarily top kill boards. It was the Pokemon that they're supporting, or that maybe your opponent will no longer prep for because they're prepping so heavily for these really obnoxious Pokemon. So hopefully I've summarized this well and got my points across. So long story short of the matter is that Dragapult definitely needs to be banned. This is a really obnoxious Pokemon with a phenomenal stat line, typing, and ability set. And I think at the very least, this Pokemon shouldn't be kept around just to, to use more Pokemon. Again, I'm a very, very allow-heavy person. I think that we should be testing stuff like, for example, Zamazenta Crowd. I think like Lando Eye should be more commonly allowed. But I do think the Dragapult is definitely a bit of a step above even just the current allows. Even if you did add this Pokemon in, I do think Dragapult is a bit high. But let me know your guys' thoughts down below. If you guys enjoyed what you saw today, of course, leave a like below and subscribe for more content just like this. Comment down your thoughts on whether you think that Pult should be banned, should be allowed. What do you think? And if there's any other Pokemon you want to see me cover, whether they're for ban discussions or just in general discussions, draft related, leave them down below as well. I would love to see them. Shout out to our channel members being Zeke Zero, Josh K Ultra Player, Randy Chappa, Mia, Rika Hoshizora, and Pokemon fan Majestic Xerneas. You are all very appreciated, and I love the fact that you support the channel. Thank you very much. With that said, I'll see you guys later. Peace out, guys.